Hello and welcome to an exclusive hour-long programme with me, Alex Belfield, talking to an old friend, Alan Titchmarsh. How are you?
Hello, Alex. I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed.
Do you know, all those years ago, was it 10 years ago now, there we were in the back of a car and I thought, I wonder if he'll have a career. And you're still here and you're still popular. It's a miracle.
It's very good of you not to rumble me to the nation on your programme and get rid of me altogether.
How are you doing? Because you're so busy and you're so popular. And let's face it, there aren't many people in show business who seem to achieve that these days.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's easy for you to say. I couldn't possibly comment. I just keep moving fast, and I think you're harder to hit that way, you know, if you're a moving target. So I do a bit of writing and a bit of broadcasting and a bit of telly and a bit of radio and gardening in between.
I mean, the interesting thing is we know you as a gardener, but then older people know you as an interviewer, and now we know you as an interviewer again if you're part of the new generation. You come and go from different formats, don't you?
Well, I've always just enjoyed variety and being stimulated, and I think if you do the same thing for too long, not only do you get bored, but I think listeners and viewers probably get a bit tired of seeing you, so I just like to freshen up every now and again, and as long as I'm doing something that's interesting and which interests me and which doesn't bore the pants off the viewers, then hopefully I'll get away with it.
We're going to talk in this programme about your new book, of course, The Knave and Spades, which is this new fascinating thing you've done. I also want to talk to you about what's happened since we last spoke, because you've got this Radio 2 show, you've got your TV chat show. It's all going very well for you. Firstly, are you happy?
I am more content than I've been in many a long year. I think to still be working, particularly when there's all this emphasis, not just on younger women on the box, but, you know, you do get the feeling as your teeth get slightly longer, that, you know, maybe that's it, you know. And I've had a cracking run at TV and radio and, you know, writing. And you think if it does all end tomorrow, you won't catch me whinging on to the tabloids, but hopefully it won't. I just love doing what I do. And I've always believed that if you're passionate about what you do and the enthusiasm can kind of come over to people without grating too much, then hopefully they'll quite enjoy being in your company as well.
I don't want to cause trouble, but are you like me? Are you not just sick of hearing about Alicia Dixon at the moment?
I mean, I don't really like knocking other folk on the box, and we're all really, I think, in this boat of we're doing a job, we try and do it as best we possibly can, and good luck to whoever makes a crack of it. But I feel sorry for the poor girl, really. I sympathise to a degree, you know. When I took over from Jeff Hamilton on Gardeners World, I mean, I was scheduled to take over from Jeff one Easter. He died the previous August, and I leapt in the last sort of 6 or 8 weeks of Gardeners World. And Jeff, because he was much loved, and quite rightly too, so he was a mate of mine, and he died in harness, as it were. It was fiendishly difficult to follow him, and he was sort of beatified. He became St. Jeff of Barnsdale, and it was blooming difficult to follow him. And I did Nature series after David Attenborough, and it was the same sort of thing. These comparisons are really odious. So I think my advice to Alicia would be, look, just try and do as good a job as you can. Keep your head down. Remember that possession is 9/10 of the law, and crack on. And eventually, in 2 or 3 years' time, if you manage to survive and somebody else takes over from you, they'll say, she's not as good as that Alicia Dixon, is she? So, but it is always tough taking over from somebody else.
Do you think we're taking it all a bit too seriously, and this is just a great PR machine for the programme and the BBC and, of course, Alicia herself and everybody else?
More than likely. I mean, you know, George Bernard Shaw said there's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. So it keeps the programme of a high profile, and I think the makers will no doubt be glad that they're being talked about. And I noticed that Arlene is going on to do this new programme with Nigel Lithgow, you know, is it So You Think You Can Dance or whatever it is. And I thought, well, I wonder if actually she was going to go and do that anyway, and everybody's just getting mileage out of the fact that the complaints keep rolling in.
And she's also on The One Show as well, which I believe is a BBC production.
Well, there you are, you see. I mean, you can only do so much, can't you, really?
And you're not into that sneery stuff, which a lot of interviewers are these days. Is that deliberate, Alan?
Oh, it's all the front, really. And I try and look nice, you know, but... well, I've always reckoned, Alex, you get more out of a river if you go in there and tickle the trout rather than wading in with a club. And, you know, there's no reason at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a chat show to do a Jeremy Paxman, because they wouldn't come back. And I think, I hope my interviews aren't bland, but I try and draw stuff out of folk and make for pleasant, intriguing and interesting conversation. And, when you've got a week of programmes and there's everybody coming on from Cilla Black to Cherie Booth to Clarissa Dixon Wright, it's a varied mix. These are not people you would normally see on Newsnight. What I want to do is to give people an insight into these folks so that when they come away from the interview, they think, I know a bit more about him or her than I knew before. And that's my main aim, but mainly to be entertaining and engaging.
I'll tell you what I like about it as well, like you've just alluded to, you never know what you're going to get next, and it's not predictable. You'll go from some really serious story in the newspapers to some camp old comic as your guest, and it's a relief because, let's face it, we do want to laugh these days, and we don't want to be dragged down by all the misery, but at the same time, it's interesting to get your take on it.
There is enough misery on TV, and I think, we get enough news programmes. I do think at times we get too many news programmes. It irritates the pants off me when it goes down to conjecture and, well, we don't quite know what's happening in there, but what probably could be happening is, and it all becomes hypothesis, and I think that's irritating. That's not news, it's gossip and hearsay, and I don't think there's anything to be gained by trying to make a news story where it hasn't yet happened or where we don't know the facts, and I find that irritating. We are good at news gathering, but sometimes I think we're a bit overzealous, and there is a danger that news departments think the entire broadcasting service exists just for them, and that's all people want. I can do with, one, maybe two news bulletins a day, one at the beginning and one at the end, just to round up what's happened. That's enough. I want to be entertained, I want to be educated, but above all, I want to have a bit of escapism as well. I don't necessarily always want to be challenged. I think a lot of the people who make television programmes don't realise that most of us are challenged all day in our working lives, and when we sit down in front of the TV, we like a bit of Poirot, or a bit of Midsummer Murders. We like a good documentary and a good nature programme as well, but we do want to be taken out of ourselves and occasionally allowed to relax.
We mentioned it earlier, but this row about who reads the news, I noticed in the papers today there's the big scandal about they're now looking for somebody over 50, which isn't that discriminatory at the same time. If you're actually saying you've got to be over 50, that's alienating anybody under it. Do you care who reads your news?
As long as they do it well, no. I don't care whether it's a man or a woman, as long as the intonation isn't irritating and they don't all lapse into newspeak. And then they do a sentence and it goes down at the end. And then if you listen, you realise they do it all the time. And that drives me bananas. But there is a knack and there's a skill to reading the news, and don't let anybody tell you, oh, they're only reading autocue, because there isn't an only reading autocue, there's a learning how to do it properly. But that said, once you've got the knack, being a newsreader isn't the most challenging job on earth.
What are you? Are you a presenter, a personality, or a journalist? How do you regard what you do on the telly?
Well, I started off as a journalist. I was an editor, firstly of books, gardening books, and then gardening magazines. So I, way back, was a member of the NUJ. So I was a journalist first, then a writer, then I became a presenter. I always feel that the words personality and celebrity are rather vacuous. They imply that either nobody else is one or nobody else has got a personality. So I think they're rather daft names, really. So, well, I don't go to that many, but when I do, they're generally quite nice. But, there's a counter side to being a famous face as well, and that is that there's a degree of responsibility that goes with it. And I think when you go down the street, you have a duty to be pleasant to folk. As two men came down the street once, and one of them knew which was my car, and he said to the mate with him, he said, "You see that?" He said, "We paid for that." And I thought, yeah, actually you did, and thank you very much.
One of my favourite lines of an interview ever was the line you gave me when I said to you about the muckiness that you write about in your books, and you say, yes, but I don't do the naming of parts.
No, I don't. There's romance in there, a little bit of love, and the occasional little sort of lusty moment, but nothing that would frighten the horses and nothing sordid, no.
Can I ask you some silly questions? I know your fans will be interested. You've probably been asked them a million times, but anyway.
Ask away.
Your favourite interview ever?
Oh, there are too many to speak of. Most recently, Julie Walters. Liza Minnelli was quite fun, if challenging. Alan Bennett is an all-time favourite, and Dirk Bogarde. Loved doing them.
Is it still a thrill when they say yes? Because they could say no.
Yes, it is. I think the danger is when you imagine that it might be quite as much of a thrill for your viewer as it is for you. I mean, people get very excited when you've got the Prime Minister coming on. And I always say, well, hang on a minute, you know, they see him on the box in the corner every blessed day. They're not thrilled that, oh, look, Alan Titchmarsh has got him today. It's just another interview as far as they're concerned. From your point of view, it might be special. And I try and make every interview worth watching. But, you know, you've got to just keep your feet on the ground with these interviews as well.
Have you done Al Gordon yet?
I haven't done Gordon, I've done David Cameron.
What did you think?
Impressed. I mean, to a degree. I think he can get more and more in touch with the people than he is at the moment. I don't just mean because he went to eat, and it's not that, but he is, as they all have to be, quite guarded. And as the interview progressed, he became more, I don't mean unguarded, but more forthcoming. And I think David will find a way of relating better to people without, you know, necessarily giving away all of his private life. I mean, I understand and sympathise with that. I think he can connect perhaps slightly better than he does at the moment. But, you know, he's, in relative terms, quite new to it all. And I think it's an unforgiving world, the world of politics, and it takes no prisoners, and it's quite a tough call. But I'll be interesting to see how he develops as we run up to next year's general election, and that if he can really engage with people and get through to them in his manner and his demeanour as well as in his policies.
Do you still get nervous when the red light goes on, whether that be on the radio or in the TV studio, and it's all about you and you've got to keep it running for that hour, or everything's going to stop on the station?
I don't get nervous. I get a lift. You know, it's kind of, right, let's get on. But not nerves anymore. I can't afford to get nerves and let them get in the way. And, you know, I'm not saving lives. That's the bottom line. I'm not poised with a scalpel over somebody's body. I'm trying to offer them entertainment in the afternoon. That said, I take my job very seriously and try not to take myself too seriously. No, I'm not. And I can't cope with folk who are. No, I don't like shouters. I was saying to somebody this morning about directors. I don't work with directors who shout. You can achieve what you want to achieve without temperament, and you can be professional and exacting without being tricky. And I prefer people who can achieve their ends by calm means.
Do you mind if we do a bit of anorak stuff now? Because I've got a bit of time to fill, and it's all about me, let's face it. You're talking to me, I've got you for the hour. Those moments when guests don't want to talk, I need your help with this. What do I do to make it interesting and get through it?
Well, the tendency when people won't talk is to talk more yourself, and to talk louder and faster. And strange enough, it's rather like waking up somebody in the audience who's nodded off, if you've got an audience. And the natural thing to do is to speak faster and to raise your voice. Well, actually, the most effective way is just to stop completely. And they suddenly realise there's silence there. And if they're asleep in the audience, they wake up because they think something's gone wrong. And if you're interviewing them and you don't fill the gap, then they have to fill it. So that can help sometimes. Body language is a great help in interviews. You've got to be really approachable body-wise. Leaning forward sometimes helps. And in other instances, leaning back helps. But body language is key. I'm very picky about how far away my chair is from my guest. And I bet it shouldn't be too close, but similarly it can't be too far away or you can't get a good rapport with them. And I bet, strangely enough, if you took a tape measure nose to nose between me and my guests, I bet it would never vary more than an inch. It's curious that, but you know those people who stand too close to you when they speak to you and you kind of want to stand back, space, and interviewing is quite critical in terms of not only body language but distance apart.
And of course you do the occasional groping, don't you, of the leg?
I am a bit of a toucher, and I try and refrain from that. But it's to make a point. I know some people perhaps don't like it. It's a natural characteristic, and I have to try and restrain myself. But I am a bit of a tapper, not a groper, but just a gentle, reassuring touch. Will sometimes say to people, "It's all right, dear." It all goes back, I suppose, to a primitive instinct that stroking was regarded as being friendly and peacemaking, if you like, rather than snarling or biting.
Let's just talk about this battle for the chat shows, because that's what everybody talks about at the moment. Do you have any competition with any of your competitors, or do you just get on and do it?
I've got enough to do competing with myself and my own shortcomings, I think, without competing with anybody else's. So I just keep my head down, battle on. I love doing what I do. To have your own chat show for an hour every day, Monday to Friday, whatever time it is the most supreme treat. I love it. Every challenge, every day is a different challenge, every day is different, and the guests all demand different things of you. I love our little sort of 15-20 minute debate that we have on something topical. I like the guests I have who do the papers and topical tips and things at the top. It's just, I fear being rumbled on the chat show because it is such a pleasure to do. I hope I can carry on doing it for yonks.
I was watching one day and I Sky Plus you because some bits are boring, let's face it, like my show. I wouldn't expect anybody to sit through the full hour. They just want to get to the good bits, don't they, Alan?
Well, the trouble with my show is, you see, 60 minutes of the 60 are good. And I am totally modest. It's mainly because I'm not in most of them. It's my guests, and I wouldn't dare impugn their watchability.
Well, I was watching one day, and it was just car crash TV for all the right reasons. You'd got a comedian on of a senior age who, in my opinion, appeared to have had a sniff of a barman's apron.
Oh, it's the way he was telling them.
Yes.
Yes.
It didn't go so well, and there was a bit of profanity. You are live. How do you deal with those moments and keep your job?
Swiftly. We do have a lady from what's called compliance or a gentleman in our gallery every day. So we are watched right the way through the programme. And I hope most people who come on who realise that it's live, most of them live, half recorded, but we always record as live. So to all intents and purposes, it is a live show. And I hope people, sign, as somebody said to me today, this unsigned contract. We have this understanding that it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this is how you behave. Just occasionally things go wrong. When you're doing 60 shows, you're bound to have the odd one which is less than smooth. And I just try, it's my job to stop the viewer from being either really annoyed or embarrassed and offended, I think. I don't mind occasionally annoying viewers because that's a sort of human reaction. But I think to be offensive to viewers is not forgivable at 3 in the afternoon. And if a guest comes on and I will swiftly... I had to send John McCririck off because he was being rude to Ingrid Tarrant. I thought, no, I'm not having this. So I said, go on, off you go, that's enough. And mercifully he got up and went. And Frank Carson, yes, I think he'd had a bit of the sherbet and he wasn't on cracking form. It's live TV, you cope with it as best you can, and folk at home think, oh my goodness, how will he cope with this one?
Well, we love it, don't we? Let's face it.
Of course you do. You love it when it goes wrong.
But of course you are live, and it's all very well having a million people from the legal team and compliance, but once it's said and it's gone, isn't it?
It is. Somebody once said to me it was a certain word, and it was a very old lady, and she'd been in a film that dealt with personal pleasuring, let's call it that. And she said, can I say the word tiddly-pom? And I said, only once. And you just have, and we moved on. So you cope as best you can. But I am aware I got very annoyed. My children are grown up now, but when they were younger, I got very annoyed when, at a time of day when I thought they shouldn't be swearing on television, it appeared, and I got annoyed because that was television deciding when it was suitable for my children to hear swearing, and I thought, no, it's not. You tell me you won't do it until after a certain time. I should be able to trust you not to do it, and I like to think that the viewer can trust me to a certain extent not to overstep the mark. We've done, we have Julie Peasgood on the programme, we have done in the past, well, she's still coming on, but we've done sort of things to improve your love life, and we always make sure we do them between 3 and 15:15, when those children who are at home are too tiny to understand, and the ones who would just about be understanding haven't quite come back from school at 3:30. And we always do it in that first quarter, and we're very careful, and we're very jolly about it, or have been. And that's my excuse for doing it, because it can be quite amusing. And
makes me blush, to be honest with you, Alan.
Well, to tell you the truth, Alex, I haven't a clue what it's all for. I don't understand. There are some items of interest we've had in that section that I still haven't worked out what to use them or where to put them.
Let's take another piece of music on that note. We'll come back and talk about the new book. Oh, and money. What are you being paid, Alan Titchmarsh?
I'm not going to tell you. I never asked my father what he earned, and I won't tell you what I earn. It's none of our business. I don't want to know what you earn.
Well, let me play a piece of music and we'll get into it. We're back on your favourite local radio station with a top star and one of my favourite people, because you're a good guest. You say it as it is. Huge row at the moment, of course, about TV money and whether the people should get it. Do you think it's obscene what people have been paid, and are you prepared to take a pay cut if they ask you to?
In answer to the first question, I think some of the sums are ridiculously high. It is a competitive market, you have to remember that. And it's all right saying if you work for the BBC you shouldn't get X. Well, nobody knows what the other side pay as well. I think it does need watching. It has got a bit obscene, the top end. But my first wage packet was £3.7 and sixpence. And I've worked extremely hard to do a bit better than that. So from my point of view, I think, you know, you enter a market and you become a part of it. But I don't think necessarily other people need to know what you earn.
Was it as showbiz in your day in terms of the pay packet? I don't want to know what that is, but when you were at your peak in the 80s on the daytime show, were you able to earn enough money, or do you look back now and think, God, I wish I could start again now?
I earned a fraction of what I earn now back then, but compared with gardening, it was an extremely good wage. You must remember that most people in my line are on the basic agricultural wage. Therefore, as well as feeling pleased that I earn what I earn, I also feel a degree of guilt in that I got where I am by gardening, basically, and then by working extremely hard and writing about it and broadcasting. But I've been very lucky to get what I do get. And I do think there's an obligation when you're in such a fortunate position that you do also fulfil your obligations in terms of, you know, charitable work and helping other folk as well.
Do you ever have a moment when you wonder, am I up to this? Am I really deserving of this adoration and my own shows and all these books and articles?
I don't believe in the adoration bit. It's not adoration. I mean, people are very, I think, sanguine about you. And for every person that thinks you're wonderful, there's another one who thinks you're a load of rubbish. Clear it off. Why is he on there all the time? So I never get complacent. And every day, you know, I do. And I'm not, you know, being sort of disingenuous about it. I do feel extremely grateful to be doing what I do. And I think, you know, I'm extremely fortunate to be in the situation to be doing a job I love and also to be being well remunerated for it. I'm very, very lucky.
Now, I'm just going down my list of questions that I didn't bother to write, by the way. Is there any business I can do for you? You didn't just come in here to talk to me because I'm a nice guy, did you?
No, I came in here to plug my book, didn't I?
You've got a book?
Spades. I've got a book.
And what's it about?
It's the third volume of Memoirs, and I did one that sort of covered everything called Trial and Error years ago. And it did so well, and they said, we want another. And I said, well, I've only lived once. But I did a bit of James Bond, and I lived twice. I then wrote Nobbut a Lad, which is about my Yorkshire childhood, and it finished when I left school. So now I'm on to youth and love affairs and all those unfortunate things that happen to you when you're a lad, and my gardening years, and it's called Knave of Spades, and it picks up from where I left school at 15, went to work in the nursery, and went on through college and Kew Gardens, and then into writing and radio and telly. So it's the later years, as it were, this one.
It's beautifully written, as all your books are. I don't know how you do it, but I can hear your voice when I read your words, which I think is the key to any great author. With this, so, I mean, it's very personal. How much of it's made up? Because it seems like you had a blessed life, but it's very real, and not everything went your way, did it?
No, it didn't. It's not made up at all. I mean, it's not a misery memoir, that's the thing. I mean, I wonder, well, it's been proven that a lot of those misery memoirs are made up just from the point of view of sort of sensationalism. There were ups and downs, as there are in everybody's lives, and tragedies and triumphs, minor triumphs sometimes. But I've always been, you know, told and taught by my parents that, you know, your glass is always half full. You're very lucky to be doing what you're doing. As they say up north, there's always somebody worse off than yourself. But it's an honest account of a life and of growing up. There's nothing fictional in it at all.
I know we've talked about this before, where you were blessed that not everybody gets today was that wonderful sense of family and community. Not so much of that is around these days, is it?
No, and common sense seems to have taken the back seat, and I think that there's a lot of things in life it sorts you out. Common sense, instinct, intuition and experience, they're all bound up together, and they're, I think, far greater things to have at your side in life than a series of government rules and regulations. If you know, I like to be self-regulating as much as anything, and I think it irritates me to a degree when I can't be, when I'm told I have to have lorries beeping when they reverse because I can't be trusted to look both ways before I cross the road. Where if I'm doing anything, I seem to have to wear a fluorescent jacket, which means that as everybody's got a green fluorescent jacket on, nobody stands out. And also when I buy a packet of peanuts, I have to be warned that the packet may indeed contain nuts and not crisps. And, you know, like all old curmudgeons, it begins to drive you nuts after a while, doesn't it?
Well, it does, to the point where, you know, where you're sat now, should we wish to take a photo of each other, we have to get a guy to fill in a form, have it approved, and then sent down to another guy to pass back to us.
It's a bit daft, isn't it, really? I mean, come on. It'll have to end soon. People will just get fed up and they won't do it. You know, all we need is one little sign in the maternity ward when you walk out the door and it says, "You're on your own now, sunshine." Solve all these problems.
How's your daughters doing, by the way? Because I remember the first time we met, there we were in the back of the car. Do you remember going from Leicester to Nottingham?
Yeah.
How ridiculous. Who would have thought of doing a radio show in the back of a car? Anyway, there you were, and you were worried about your daughters because a thing called a boyfriend had turned up for the first time, and I was questioning whether you were going to be able to cope. Is everything okay?
Everything's fine. They're both teachers now and very happy. So, yeah, they're grown up and they're teaching other people's children now instead of being taught themselves. So they're a great couple of girls. We've been very, very lucky with them.
How can you help me, Alan? I'm just thinking all those years ago, I was sat there in the back of the car, and today I'm still doing exactly the same job and not moved on one little bit. It's not going well, is it?
You're still there. That's the key. Still there. KBO, as Winston Churchill said. Keep ring on. That's what to do.
Congratulations on the new book. Knave of Spades is a lovely insight into your beginnings, and it really gives us an understanding of why you are the man you are today. And when I turn you on, the one thing, be careful how I say that, but when I switch you on the telly, that sounds better. You have great integrity, and there aren't really many people we trust anymore. A lot of them have gone like the Parkies. You're not trying to shaft your guests, are you, and get one over them?
No, not remotely. I mean, all I want to do is to get them to show themselves off well. Sometimes even that's a bit tricky. One or two of them are a bit reluctant or nervous or a bit ikey, as they say up north. But, you know, that's my job, is to hold the mirror up and reflect them to the viewer. And if they are peculiar and tricky and difficult, then that will come over. But I just want to show my viewers what that person's really like, to leave them knowing a bit more about them.
So there's one question I could have asked you today in our final minute. What would it have been? There must be something that you were hoping I was going to ask you.
I always approach interviews not wanting to know the questions and being quite relieved when they're different from the ones I expected. And I can honestly say that every single question you just asked me was completely unexpected.
It's because I didn't bother writing anything down. It's not a talent.
I'm so relieved you didn't ask me why your wisteria wouldn't flower.
Alan Titchmarsh, thank you so much for coming on the programme again. You must have better people to talk to than me.
Yes, I must. Goodbye.
But lovely to see you. And the new book's in the stores now. Knave of Spades. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers.